With the Oscar announcements and new trailers this week, Hollywood is off to a big start. All this and more, including our review of Episode 3 of the 12th season of Doctor Who on today's episode of the Geek Watch Podcast.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 96 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hi, Brian.
And so today's the day they just wanted to drop a bunch of trailers on us. Like in the last couple of hours, like 3 trailers have dropped in the last hour and a half. And so we'll definitely talk about that today. The first trailer that I saw that I wasn't expecting, actually the first 2 trailers we're going to talk about are for TV shows. And one of them is for an Apple Plus show that I hadn't even heard of. It's called MYTHIC QUEST Raven's Banquet.
That sounds very Dungeons and Dragons. That sounds very...
Yes, it's very much... Actually, it's meant for that because it's about a startup company that's creating a new video game.
Oh, okay.
The show has been developed by the creators and writers of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, that...
So you're getting an idea of what to look at. So basically you have a... what's funny about this is, I guess, the main person who's creating the game, he's not a programmer. He's just basically putting the money up to do the game, and he's making himself the lead character of the game. And so he's basically Gary suing himself and making himself this big muscular barbarian fighter in this game that looks like him. And then all these other people are expected to program it and make this thing work. And there's another character who's a female character and she's just absolutely frustrated and fed up with this guy because, of course, he wants... So
do you see scenes from the video game?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so it kind of gives me the Guild vibe.
Yes,
yeah,
there's a lot
Felicia
of that.
Day, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely that vibe to it as well. But yeah, you just have this guy who wants to... he wants this video game, as he puts it, to be his legacy. Again, it's a interesting, if weird process to make yourself immortal, I guess. There's this cool video game character's got my face on it, and he's building an entire company to do this. So there's definitely a little bit of Silicon Valley in that, if you've seen that HBO show. I'm definitely intrigued by it. We also got a trailer today Showtime trailer for the Penny Dreadful spinoff.
Oh, I never watched the original Penny Dreadful, but I've heard good things.
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of it when it was on. There was a lot of pastiches to different monsters, Frankenstein and werewolves, and there was some demon possession and all that stuff. And I enjoyed the show. While although again, it's one of those situations where they weren't sure exactly when and how they were going to end it, and so the last season was kind of lost itself, and I do mean lost. The show lost. So, but I enjoyed the 3 seasons of it. And City of Angels, it's a spinoff, but it's not the same thing for sure. It's done by the same producers and writers as the original Penny Dreadful, but it's definitely its own thing. Los Angeles before, it was 1938. So you're dealing with a lot of, on the one side, you're right before the United States enters into World War II, but it's also, you have Los Angeles, of course. At this point, you have a lot of Mexican citizens that are basically fighting to keep their home in a real sense, that Los Angeles belonged to them. And so you have Mexicans living there fighting against, basically, white settlers coming in, fighting literally for the heart of the city.
Wild West gentrification.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. But it looks really interesting. Nathan Lane is in this series, and it looks like they're going to go over a lot of different things, and so I'm definitely intrigued by that. But
I've seen that Natalie Dormer went over there. She came from Game of Thrones and Tudors.
She's got, that kind of look to her, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and so it definitely looks like it's going to be something interesting to check out for sure. Let's talk a little bit of movie stuff because, and you showed this to me, is I guess the Vin Diesel Bloodshot. There was a trailer for it, a small trailer for it back in October last year, and I totally missed.
I didn't see it, and I follow him on Instagram. I don't know why I missed it.
Yeah, I totally missed that, but they came out with a new trailer today. It's of course based off the comic book, but yeah, I had no idea this was out there. It completely flew under my radar, but yeah, it sort of has that. Universal Soldier meets Memento.
Yeah, and unless they have something else going on with this movie, and this won't be a spoiler because it's in the trailer. I think they gave away the entire movie in the trailer. The kind of secret that they are imposing. He's an assassin. They were imposing their targets onto the face of his wife's killer in his memory.
Yeah.
So he wakes
even assuming
up,
that there is one.
Right. We don't even know, did he even have a wife?
Yeah, we don't know what his background is.
So what is, because to me, that seems like that would have been the big reveal, that this wasn't real. And so he wakes up, they told him, we brought you back to life to be our ultimate killer. He says, I've got something to do first. And he goes and kills his wife's killer. And then he wakes up again. And they say, we've brought you back to life to be our ultimate killer. And he says, I have something to do. And then he goes and kills his wife's killer again. So, yeah, Groundhog Day, Universal Soldier.
Yeah. Well, they certainly indicate more, I think, in the second movie that as this goes along, he starts getting these moments of deja vu, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I think the premise of the movie is specifically how he's being manipulated, but how he's able to fight against that manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Maybe leaving himself clues or...
But yeah, definitely you can tell from the trailer there these moments where he hears a song, the Johnny Cash song that they play, of Memories, that starts up his programming, and he's like, is this thing on repeat or something? Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, technically, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, but it does look like a fascinating piece of sci-fi. Of course, it's based off the comic book, so it certainly looks fascinating to me. I definitely want to check that out.
Not Dark Horse. What is it? What's the comic book company that does it?
Was it Valiant?
Valiant, yes. They don't get a lot of love.
No.
They have a few things out there, and they're not as big as the Marvel or the DC, but they got some good stuff out there, so check them out.
Well, that's the thing that I've noticed with and this was the same thing with back in the 80s and the golden age of horror, is that when it became really popular, they started mining anything that they could. So now that you have Marvel comic movies are doing really well, and DC starting to catch up. A lot of companies are looking for different properties to create, and they really do. Even though in a sense, it doesn't feel like a superhero movie. In the trailer they say, the superhero movie just got an upgrade. Although he doesn't. He has superpowers because of the nanites, but it's not your typical superhero movie. But they certainly play up the superhero aspect, obviously, since superhero movies are really popular right now, for sure. But they're spending a great deal of time, I would say, to develop that. So I'll also mention and this just came out today. I don't even know if you knew about this, but we've got a new Black Widow trailer just came out.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yay.
In this one, of course, they are really playing up the Taskmaster. You see a lot more of the Taskmaster in this one. And he's as badass as you would expect him to be. He looks amazing. The way that they're playing him off, again, if you're familiar with him in the comics, he has photographic reflexes. So any moves that he sees somebody do, he can repeat them. And he learns how to do them.
Adaptive muscle memory.
Exactly. And so he just has to see somebody do something once, and he's able to do it. So there's that great scene where he's fighting Black Widow, and he's basically copying her moves. Move for move, because as she does things, he learns how to do them instantly. So, and he does have the shield. I was wondering if they were going to give him the shield and the sword like in the comics, and yes, he does. He has them. So, and of course he has the shield because he's seen Captain America in the news, and so he has his moveset. If there was any more question of whether or not, I wanted to see this movie, obviously I was going to see it anyway. But yeah, this definitely has me excited for more of that. Another trailer that dropped, the movie that flat out just will not die, The New Mutants.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't even know that, that was still happening.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we've been talking about that for a while because it's been for, it's like, were they going to put it out? Were they not going to put it out? So they are going to put it out.
Was it going to be a horror movie? Was it going to be a PG-13 movie? Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, it was supposed to come out 2 years ago. This tells you how long this whole
production purgatory.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was going to die or be, released straight to video or whatever, or in this case, straight to Disney Plus. But no, it's coming out February the 7th. And here's the weird thing about it. The movie showed up on the D23 website, and so everybody was like, "Oh my God, they're going to make this part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe." And then suddenly they were like, "Wait a minute, no, we're not," and they took the page down. But there was a minute there that they thought that people were thinking that this was going to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They were going to put it there, and which of course would be the first mention of mutants in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it would be, of course, with the New Mutants. One thing I noticed from the trailer is a lot of the powers are very comic accurate, which I wasn't sure they were going to do that. I mean, these are the characters that are directly out of the New Mutants comic, which surprised me. But I mean, there's been shoots and reshoots with this film. I mean, again, it was supposed to come out 2 years ago. It's coming out now. Part of this too is, I have to say, and this is sort of of course, I'll go more into this, but later on another story. But I know that Marvel can be a little nervous about stepping away from the formula too much and making a horror movie, a superhero horror movie. That, I would say, for them, that makes them a little bit nervous. And how nervous we're going to talk about here in a little while. But that's why I think this movie, as many reshoots that they've done and all the problems that it's had, I don't know how good this movie's actually going to be.
But it'll be better than Cats?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, the one thing is, for a lot of reasons, I'm invested in this movie doing well. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm definitely invested in seeing a superhero movie that's not part of the formula, shall we say, to do well, because of course that expands what kind of storytelling you can do in that genre. But speaking of horror movies, superhero movies, we did get a trailer here the last few days. The trailer for Morbius dropped.
Oh, I never went back to watch it. I saw that it was out, but I never watched it.
There's a lot of interesting things in that trailer because we do get a Spider-Man reference in the trailer.
Okay.
Well, we get two of them. One is we do see a poster of Spider-Man on the wall with murderer written on it, which of course is a reference to the end credit scene in Spider-Man Far From Home. But what was interesting about this, and a lot of people have been speculating, is the picture of Spider-Man is Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Not Andrew Garfield, of course, not Tom Holland, but they went back that far. And some people were wondering, why did they use that picture? And what's interesting is it's a picture of that suit, of the Sam Raimi suit from the Spider-Man video game. So are they referencing the Spider-Man video game? Are they what are they referencing exactly? But then at the end of the trailer, of course, we get the Vulture at the end of it. I mean, it looks like the Vulture, where he's talking to Michael Morbius and goes, so how's this hero thing working out for you? So we get that wonderful moment where, Batman's talking to the Joker in a Marvel movie. So however that works out. But there's a lot of speculation about exactly what how this film is going to turn out. But again, it definitely has that strong horror aspect to it with, you get to see Jared Leto, full Michael Morbius, and not a pleasant sight for sure. I mean, he's definitely bestial, vampiric. And again, we're running into a situation where it looks like it's going to be a flat out horror movie. The trailer makes it look like a horror movie. And so we're getting, this will be another Marvel based horror movie, which I'm deeply invested in it working out for a bunch of reasons, which we will definitely talk about later for sure. But before we get to that part, let's talk a little bit of Marvel television news, because The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they have halted production on the TV show indefinitely at this point.
Ooh.
A reason for that being is they were heading to Puerto Rico to film, and of course Puerto Rico just had this huge 6.4 magnitude earthquake.
Yeah.
So that's kind of shut everything down at this point. Now, they haven't said that whether or not this is going to delay the release of the show. But, I mean, obviously, as of right now, they're not going to be able to shoot anything down there. But at this point, they've put production on hold indefinitely. So there's no telling when they're going to be starting up again. But that's put a kibosh on things at this point. But speaking of bad news in Marvel, we have to bring this up. Scott Derrickson is no longer going to be directing Doctor Strange 2. And there's been a lot of speculation about why that is. He cited, as tends to get cited in these situations, creative differences. Now, there have been people who have gone back into his Twitter feed and reading his tweets and have seen references to how movie release dates are the enemy of art, how he had a conversation with Rian Johnson that made him feel better about certain things. This sounds like there's been some issues between what Marvel wanted and what he wanted to do in the movie, and I feel that a lot of that probably has to do with Derrickson wants to do a more horror-based movie. And they aren't, Kevin Feige and Marvel, they're not that interested in straying that far away from, let's just call it, the formula. And I think it's important for them to be able to do a straight-out horror film for this. I think that's the way to go, because after a while, you're just going to get bored of the same formula with movies. I think if Marvel is going to continue to do as well as it does, they're going to need to stray away from the formula, because if the movies become formulaic, people are going to become bored with them. Now, I do understand that if you do a horror film, you're going to lose some viewers. There's going to be some people who do not like horror movies, and they're not going to go see one, even if it says Marvel on it. I get that. But I don't think that every Marvel film has to make $1 billion. It doesn't have to. And I think that for the sake of the storytelling and as well as, keeping things going, you have to be willing to make films that, that have a little different take on the Marvel universe. And that's one reason why I said before that I'm really invested in New Mutants and Morbius doing well. Because if it does well, maybe that'll show Marvel, hey, you can do more horror aspects to your movies, and it'll be fine. You'll still do well. I mean, honestly, the only reason why they're doing an R-rated Deadpool 3 is because Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 did so well. So there's no real worry about, that they're going into uncharted territory there, because it's already been proven that, yeah, people will go see the Deadpool, even though it's an R-rated film. And so, I mean, for me, I think it's important that that Marvel have a wider palette to be able to do different things. And so, but I don't think, as far as bringing horror elements into Doctor Strange, how comfortable they're going to feel doing that until maybe some other Marvel properties being done by Sony do well, and so they'll feel more comfortable with it. And so, like I said, I'm really invested in these films doing well, so that Marvel Studios feels better about it, I think. But I mean, you don't watch an awful lot of horror movies, but let me ask you, I mean, with Doctor Strange, with them talking about it being more of a horror film, would that have kept you from watching it?
No. I think it sounds interesting, and there's so many. If you are going to limit yourself to just the superhero comics, you're missing out on a whole bunch. I mean, From Hell, which they did do a movie of, but that's definitely a horror comic, and it could be a series in itself. I mean, you're really limiting yourself when you could see 30 Days of Night. There's so many good graphic novel comic series. Comic doesn't mean automatically mean funny or superhero. There's vast, genres out there that you can pick from. And if you're only going to do one thing, you're really going to limit yourself. So I don't think that would be a good idea for anyone, not just Marvel, but anyone who is choosing to do. I don't even remember what studio is doing BLOODSHOT. But it's, they're taking a risk. It's not as well known as, some of the others, but they're taking a risk, and it looks like it's going to be good, even if I think they've given away the twist. I don't think that was a good idea. But there could be something else going on in the movie that I don't know yet.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I would say that BLOODSHOT, I think they're playing more on it being a Vin Diesel movie than, say, a superhero movie.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, dead wife, it's automatically.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks like it's going to be, it's a definitely a Vin Diesel movie. And
Vin Diesel and Jason Statham, bald guys whose wives get killed in the cold open of every movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I always find it funny. People, any ladies that tell me they would love to be married to them, I'm like, well, at least not in one of their movies. You should.
I mean, including the best movie ever made, In the Name of the King, Dungeon Siege in the Name of the King.
Oh yeah, well, there you go. Well, hey, not that I'm an expert on women, but I hear that being avenged is so romantic. So. Since we're in the Hollywood moment, we have to talk about the Oscars because they've just made Oscar announcements.
Yeah, not many surprises.
No, definitely not a lot
pretty
of.
Pretty much what you expected from.
Well, I will tell you what. The one thing that, of course, I was on, and I can't take it back because I said it on the podcast, so you can go back and see that I said this. So I can't take it back, but I remember saying that I thought that they would nominate Endgame for Best Picture as, to say, that this was the one Oscar for all the films that they did, just like they did, with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, that the last one got the Oscar. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen at all, not in the slightest. In fact,
with Lord of the Rings, that was a lean year, but this was a heavy, heavy year for Oscar bait.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we had the historical dramas, we had the biopics, we had mental illness. I mean, everything that is just the Oscar bait. I mean, they just reached out and smashed it.
Yeah, basically, Endgame, they have they got a nomination for visual effects, and that's it. That's all that they got. Now, that's not to say that the Oscars were ignoring superhero movies, for sure, because Joker got 11 Oscar nominations.
Yeah, but it like you talk about the formula, it goes against the superhero formula.
Yeah.
And it's mental illness. It's looking through the eyes of the villain.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about before how there's a lot of parallels to Taxi Driver in this one. And
absolutely.
So it's not really that dependent on the comic books, which is what made it interesting for me. And it seemed kind of strange. It got a nomination for Best Adaptive Screenplay because it's not really being adapted from the comic books, but because of that character that says, adaptive screenplay. So.
I mean, we got Joker and we got Gotham City and Thomas Wayne. That's about it as far as, and it's just characters popped over.
Yeah.
Maybe it gives us a reason why, but something that I guess did, not really surprising, but unusual, out of the ordinary, I think, was Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix getting some noms there. They got 2 Best Pictures and, actors in both those pictures, getting the small screen, getting nominated. That's
well, here's the thing, and this is going back to what we talked about before, about stepping out, outside the box and being, afraid to, Marvel being afraid to go against their formula, and other studios basically looking for a formula that works. It's made them very cautious about what they put out, and because of that, a lot of other places like Netflix, who are willing to take those chances, it's really starting to pay off. And so I think that we're going to see something like we saw, back in the in the 50s and the 60s, where, independent films really started to take off because studios weren't that willing to go into certain things. And You know,
I mean,
once,
that was back when studios owned actors.
Right.
And, you know, they would trade them like baseball cards and Pokemon.
yeah. Well, and you had that moment basically where you had the defranchisement of movie theaters, where, you know, where, of course, back in the day, you know, studios would own theaters. And so if you wanted
So
to
you'd
see
had 5 in like every town.
exactly, because the MGM theaters would play the MGM movies. Well, you know, once all that went away and independent movies could get into those theaters and they started doing really well, then, of course, then you get, you know, movies like Midnight Cowboy, where the studios saw, hey, this works. You know, they basically duplicated the formula and they were able to put those movies out, and they were successful. And so, in a real sense, you know, with Netflix getting, like you said, getting 2 movies in there for Best Picture, and they're not standard, you know, formulaic Hollywood films. I mean, they're not films that a Hollywood studio would have taken a chance on, even with a name director like Martin Scorsese, which that should be enough, but it just isn't anymore. But the fact that you know, that you have these films out there that are doing well and getting Oscar nods, you know, maybe Hollywood will feel comfortable to start taking some chances on films like this. And this might help kind of rejuvenate Hollywood and help it, you know, get its courage back and put out some different things. You know, it's funny because we can mention Scarlett Johansson has 2 Oscar nominations. One for Best Actress in Marriage Story and one for Best Supporting Actress in Jojo Rabbit. And both of these are films that are, even though one is a studio film and the other one's a Netflix film, but they're both films that are not typical Hollywood movies.
Yep,
You know?
I haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, but I do love Wes Anderson, and it reminds me of a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, it definitely has that feel. And I mean, Taika Waititi is just he's an amazing writer-director. And the fact that he took it, again, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's a film that you're taking a risk for sure. It's like, well, we're going to have this child character who has Adolf Hitler as his imaginary friend.
And didn't know it until I saw that it got Best Adapted Screenplay, that this was a book before it was a movie. So, wow.
Yeah. Somebody went there. So, but I'm, you know, so like I said, my hope is that with things like Netflix and of course now with Apple Plus, and, you know, you have all the streaming stuff, and we've been talking about the streaming wars forever for sure. But the fact that we now have all these different venues that are willing to take chances and put things out, I think that's going to be really good for Hollywood if they're going to be willing to follow suit and maybe come out with some new stuff. So, but I do have to mention this. Let's get away from Hollywood for a moment and let's talk Build-A-Bear. So,
okay, what Baby Yoda?
yes, Baby Yoda.
Oh,
well, I mean,
finally.
Everybody's been asking forever, you know. Build-A-Bear has had they've had you know, this deal with Star Wars forever, you know, and you've been able to get Star Wars Build-A-Bear stuff
for years, yeah.
And so it was only a matter of time. I'm sure that the minute Baby Yoda appeared, there, you know, Build-A-Bear was on the phone. It's like, look, we got a license with
Why
you.
don't we have this yet? And
yeah, give us.
I forget who pointed out to me, because I was like, why didn't we have this beforehand? Someone pointed out to me that they probably didn't want to spoil the surprise of Baby Yoda, and that if they had been in production of making these toys, then definitely someone would have leaked it and been like, hey, there's going to be a Baby Yoda.
Well, I mean, we've seen how many times toys have spoiled major plots in Marvel movies. I mean, how many times has that happened? It's happened forever. So yeah, I'm sure that they pretty much kept that under wraps. But yeah, Build-A-Bear, they've been really big on getting the Geek license, because they announced this back in September. We haven't talked about this. This hasn't come out yet, and I'm not sure when this is going to happen. But Build-A-Bear just got this big license with BBC to do Doctor Who Build-A-Bears.
Oh, so they're going to have teeny tiny little Tom Baker scarves. It's going to be so cute.
Yep. And so I've already seen pictures of what will be the, you know, David Tennant doctor. So
I think I've seen the Jodie Whittaker bear. I could be just imagining it in my head, but
yeah,
that's
so
exciting.
Yeah, so Build-A-Bear, if you want to get your geek on at night, there you go.
I would love to be able to build a Dalek and then dress it in a Doctor Who costume. That'd be
there you go.
That'd be really funny.
Yeah, there you go. So that's but now that we're talking about Doctor Who, of course, you know what that means.
Time for What the Who.
Yes, and of course, we're going to be talking about episode 3 called Orphan 55.
Orphan
and
55.
There's going to be spoilers, folks. I mean,
Yes.
obviously, we're gonna spoil the heck out of this one. So if you haven't seen it yet, please feel free to pause everything, watch it, and we'll
see you back here.
We'll see you back here. And so, Orphan 55. Wow. So
yes.
there's them continuing on with situations where you're like, how's the Doctor going to get out of this one? We get a monster that pretty creepy. Definitely. This is definitely your hide behind the couch moment. And of course, we get that big reveal at the end. It's Earth. So
you maniacs, you blew it up.
You blew it up.
Yes, it was very, I think, classic Who, classic Star Trek, and Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All wrapped into one. It was great. I love the cheesy furry costume of Hyphen with a 3.
Oh yeah,
she was awesome. She with her tail, she was just adorable. And then you find out that your reality is you're in a box. It's that's where I really feel like the Twilight Zone and that it was Earth all along.
Oh yeah, well that moment when of course they were known as the Drex, when the Drek King or leader picks up the Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, by her neck and is holding her and her legs are kicking. I'm like, oh wow, did they really go here and do this? Yeah, they did for sure.
Yep.
Now, one thing like I said, we talked about this already. The whole twist at the end that you find out is that this planet that's named Orphan 55, that's basically these orphan planets that their ecosystems have been destroyed and they're basically unfit for human life.
Earth got used up.
Yeah. And so you find out Orphan 55 is Earth in the future because of climate change. It's completely wrecked.
We don't have a breathable atmosphere anymore. So we've got this little dome of a spa that makes you think you're on this paradise.
Right.
And,
and you have the Drex who are able to basically, they are
kind of matrixy there too then.
Yeah. They are the last of the human species that were able to adapt and learn how to breathe carbon monoxide and but they're big scary monster characters. But and of course, I was expecting the minute they did that reveal, people were going to go, oh, here they are, bunch of progressive SJWs. Here we go, that they're going to be preaching at us about, global warming and all that stuff. And I will say this, and I do have to say this about this episode as a writer. Everyone will always tell you that, if you want to send a message, call Western Union. Is that stories aren't a place to get political. And let's be honest, Doctor Who in the past has definitely gotten political, especially when it comes to environmental. I mean, you can look at Pertwee's, you get Inferno and the Green Death and, as far back as that. So it's not like Doctor Who has never been political before.
No,
so.
and this, and as far as sci-fi, this isn't new. Like, we were saying, you maniacs, you blew it up at the big nuclear scare. I mean, that's what it is. There's people in Planet of the Apes. I'm sorry, we've been talking about this, not even mentioning. We're talking about Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. It's Earth, and they've blown it up. And beneath the Planet of the Apes, there are people worshiping a bomb.
Right.
So, I mean, that was the big scary thing of that time. And now this is kind of our big scary thing right now is climate change and everything that's doing. The brush fires in Australia have never had this much devastation before. And so, that's kind of where we're at. This is just the big thing right now. You know, in another 10 years, it'll be something different. And
well, maybe,
maybe,
you know, possibly it might be. But here's the thing, and I'm saying again, I'm saying this as a writer, you know, like I said, a lot of writers and a lot of people will tell you, you know, that you shouldn't have a message in your stories, and I don't agree with that. I absolutely don't agree with that. I think that some of the best stories do have messages in them. But that being said, I understand why people say not to put messages in your stories, because you can do it. If you do it, you can do it wrong, and you can do it wrong in a big way. And I got to say, as a Doctor Who fan and loving Doctor Who as I am, I also have to say, as a writer, yeah, they kind of did it wrong. And the reason for that is, of course, you get the big speech at the end where basically your characters are lecturing the audience. One of the biggest problems you can run into when you're dealing with a story that has a message in it is, as a writer, you become so invested in the message that you want to make absolutely sure that the audience gets the message. And so because of that, you can be really ham-handed with your message. And I think toward the end, they got really ham-handed. I have to say that, and which wasn't necessary. Again, you look at stories like The Crucible. I mean, that story is an allegory for McCarthyism, and that was the point of it. Are
you a communist? Are you a witch?
Exactly.
I saw so-and-so with a communist. I saw so-and-so with the devil.
Exactly. That's exactly what was going on there. So, yes, great stories have messages, but the thing about it is, when you are so invested in the audience getting that message, you know, a lot of bad writing can come out of that. And I think if you want to deliver a good message in a story, you have to be willing to take the risk that somebody in your audience isn't going to get it. You know, that's the thing.
X-Men 2 is a good one.
Yeah.
Have you tried not being a mutant? You know, have you tried not being gay? It's subtle, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, the thing about it is, it's like, well, again, you know, I'm sure there are people who read the Crucible who didn't realize, oh my God, they're talking about McCarthy.
Well, of course, the first time I performed, because I've performed it twice. First time I performed The Crucible, I was 12, so I didn't know. I didn't even realize, you know, the way they coached us through the acting portion of that I was faking it. I thought that I was really possessed by spirits and was really seeing the devil and really seeing birds and things like that. So
and then you were like, oh, wait a minute.
Wait a second. You know, and later when you study it in school,
then you realize, wait a minute.
It's high school before, well, here where we live in West Virginia, it's high school before you read The Crucible. And that's when you start studying it and you look at the parallels and the like. And start really critically thinking about literature.
Oh, yeah. But, so, I mean, like I said, my complaint with this episode had to be the fact that, like, at the end, we basically get, you know, we, the audience, get lectured. And the message, I mean, they basically just drilled it into your head because they wanted to make sure that you understood what was going on here. And I think a lot of subtlety was lost in that for sure. Not to say it's not a serious problem, but when you're, when you're writing a story where you want to put a message in there, you know, you have to use some tools of subtlety for sure. The minute you start drilling a message into your reader or your viewer or whatever is, you know, when your message becomes less effective. But I mean, besides that, I did enjoy the episode, and I'm looking forward to next week because it's got this
historical.
We get it. Well, we do get an historical, and I have to say that as far as naming episodes go, this has got to be one of the most fun names ever. Which it's going to be called Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. So that sounds like that's going to be a really fun episode to check out. And of course, tonight we get the 2-part finish for Crisis on Infinite Earths. So that series, which I've seen the first 3, and I'll be watching, I guess, the 2-parter tonight. to see how everything ends. And I guess we can talk about that next week for sure. And of course, we'll have that and Doctor Who, and we'll see what else develops over the coming week. And so, with that said, we come to the end of episode 96 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.